Good evening and welcome to the ABCs of Faith. I'm Dino.
And I'm Larry, and we are here at First Presbyterian Church with a show that you should be familiar with at this point because we are knocking on the door of being halfway through the alphabet.
Halfway through the show that helps you know.
So you can grow.
And Larry, the L word, I'll be honest with you, was a bit of a downer this week.
Many of the ones we got in were a little bit
sad.
They were
depressing.
A little depressing, but
And
we went with it.
We went with it, and let's just kick off the show with our first word.
Is it Lamentations?
Lucifer.
Oh, is it Lucifer?
It is
Wow.
Lucifer.
Wow.
So Lucifer is not just the name of a popular show on the Fox network. I've never seen it.
I haven't seen it. Every time we see an advertisement for it, we're like, really?
Next. Yeah.
That's a show?
But it is actually a name that's applied to the devil throughout Christianity, but it's kind of weird how that even came to be because the idea of Lucifer, it comes from a very old concept, even before Christianity, of this fallen angel that comes out of the sky and gets condemned basically to the underworld. And the star Venus was originally the idea that, based on its patterns of movement in the sky, that's what Lucifer was. The word translates to morning star. And Lucifer, the proper name, is actually a Latinization that only comes up in Scripture one time, and you have to go into the book of Isaiah, chapter 14, in the King James Version of the Bible to even find that name. But there's a lot of debate with commentators and biblical scholars as to whether or not Isaiah is calling out Satan or if he's calling out the king of Babylon. So, the whole idea of morning star, the king who is fallen from the grace of the heavens, could easily be applied to that king of Babylon who's taking over God's people, going to force them to disband their nation for a while and go into exile. So,
wow.
With that said, there are some extra biblical texts like the Apocrypha and some other very strange writings that make Lucifer the brother of Jesus, and there's this epic battle. The whole point of it, none of it is biblical.
Right.
This whole Lucifer concept has been more cultural than anything else and historic for a long time in its being cultural, but I think the moral of the story here is, regardless of what it means, don't name your child Lucifer.
Yes, because
maybe your dog at best.
Right. Between art and history and Hollywood, we've got interesting pictures and depictions.
Don't we?
Yeah.
So there you go. I hope that cleared it up for you. And Larry, you already kind of pulled the rug back on the next word.
I didn't want people to be too disappointed with the L words, thinking that we were going to have a really great L word like love for February or something like that. No, the ones we got in were legitimately depressing. So Lamentations is my word, or at least the next word.
It's a book of the Bible.
It is a book of the Bible, and it's an interesting book of the Bible in that it's broken up into sections. It's basically Hebrew poetry. So a lot of the people that like to study Hebrew poetry get into the way it flows and the way it's written and the sections and all of that. But the easiest way to look at the book of Lamentations is it's written after the fall of Jerusalem, and it is a bunch of lamentations.
It's a bunch of sad statements.
Sad statements, but they're tying everything about it back to the sinfulness of the nation and the sinfulness of the people, which for me is a big takeaway with the book of Lamentations.
Yeah, it provides a lot of good application because those people, ended up where they were, the people of God, because in large part their own behavior, their own choices.
Yeah, and the time leading up to Easter and during Lent, sometimes we read from the book of Lamentations.
Yeah, very cool.
And now it's time for a younger perspective.
The law is rule citizens follow, helps us not do wrong things at the wrong time, and it helps citizens get together and respect each other. God gives his followers a lot of laws because he wants us to follow them.
So for our people and places this week, we do that every week with the letter of the alphabet we're at, and The L word for today is Laodicea.
That is an interesting word to spell.
It is an interesting word to spell, an interesting word to say, and it's an ancient city that no longer exists.
Wow.
It was in Asia Minor, which is now Turkey. And the bulk of what we know about Laodicea is that Paul, on one of his missionary journeys, may have gone there or may have gone close by. The only reason we know anything about the fact that there was a Christian church there is in the book of Colossians, the letter to the church in Colossae, which Paul says you should exchange this letter with the letter I sent to the church in Laodicea. However, we don't have that letter, so we don't know how that exchange happened, but they're only 10 miles away from each other, so maybe like sister churches
Wow.
at that early period of history. Now, Laodicea really got its name in the book of Revelation. Chapter 3, it becomes one of the 7 churches that are called out by God, the 7 churches in Asia Minor, again in Revelation chapter 3, and kind of the bulk of what we know about the teaching to those churches comes from the statement about the church in Laodicea, which is that they are lukewarm in their faith. And God says, I'd rather spit you out of my mouth.
Vomit.
Either be hot or cold, don't be lukewarm. And, that preaches, and we talk about that. And again, youth ministry days, that was a common theme in preaching and all that. But God gives them a rebuke and tells them they need to change their ways. And we don't know what became of that, but they needed to take their faith a lot more seriously and not just be complacent about it. So that's what Laodicea teaches us.
Very interesting. And our person for this week is Levi.
Oh, Larry.
Yeah.
You
So,
picked your son's name.
well, I didn't exactly pick my son's name,
think
but
you did.
I did draw the straw that handed me my son's name.
Yes.
And I decided to go the Old Testament route and look at Levi in the Old Testament, the third son of Jacob and Leah. And so they had 12 sons. At one point, Levi got into a little, I guess, trouble. When I read the story,
A kerfuffle.
it sounds like trouble because him and his brother Simeon went into this town called Shechem and essentially did some bad stuff.
Shouldn't have gone there.
Well, it was revenge based. It's an interesting story, so Google it, look it up. Definitely worth reading. But Levi was also kind of the first and the one that named the tribe of Levites.
Yeah.
So that tribe, one of the 12, grew out of his lineage. And in that tribe was some famous people like Moses and Aaron and Ezekiel and Ezra and I think Samuel, all came from the tribe of Levites.
Yeah, and they were the priests.
They were historically, they did priestly work, religious work. Some of them were actually temple guards. There were some musicians in the Levites. So interesting group.
Very cool. And should also mention that Matthew
Yes.
in the New Testament, his
Levi.
name was Levi. So
Yep, absolutely.
And now it's time for a deeper perspective.
we've been having to follow laws our whole lives, Larry.
That is true.
And this is nothing new, especially for God's people. Back in the Old Testament, so God's kind of getting his people together, getting this covenant together in which he'll protect them and be their God and give them a promised land. And in return, they promise to be obedient to whatever laws he gives them. And he gives them a lot of laws. The bulk of them are found in the book of Leviticus. If you want to take a look at that book, it's kind of a grueling read, but what I really appreciate about Leviticus and the laws and how it portrays the laws is that it really shows God's attention to detail in our lives, and I always have appreciated that fact about it. But
You used the word grueling and you meant boring. I'm just kidding.
so the people had to follow the law, and if they broke the law for some reason, God had all these ways that they could atone for it. They could make up for their law to get closer to God. So now once we get to the New Testament, the law actually changes dramatically because Jesus is on the scene, and he specifically says, I didn't come to abandon the law, but I did come to modify the way you live. And what he did is he left the people with the two most important laws. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, ... and love your neighbor as yourself. So the whole of the law that the Old Testament folks followed can be summed up in those two. And that's the takeaway for us. We live a life in obedience to God and treat others with kindness. We are adhering to the law in its intended purpose.
Yes, which sounds so simple, but very hard.
Very hard. And Larry, that is actually the most upbeat word we have on the show today.
It was indeed.
You're going to close things out with an even worse word, but here's what you do. You shoot us an email. It goes to Larry, which is another L word, okay?
It is.
Larry at Bradenton.church. You tell them what you want to hear about on the ABCs of faith, and we'll be happy to get to those. Obviously, we're not picking these words ourselves, okay? You're helping us, and we thank you very much for that.
Closing the show today with the word leprosy. It's an infectious skin disease,
Yes.
obviously because it's mentioned in the Bible way back in the Old Testament even. It's been around for a long, long time.
Yes.
In the Old Testament in particular, if you had leprosy, they attributed that to sin for whatever reason.
Being cursed.
Being cursed, having something like that going on. There's a famous Syrian commander in the Old Testament by the name of Naaman that essentially had leprosy, and then through a king, Elisha, he kind of came in contact with Elisha or was sent to Elisha. Elisha basically said, take a bath 7 times in the Jordan River. Well, I don't guess he said take a bath. He probably said something like go dip in the Jordan River.
Sure, but
And
he did it.
He was obedient and he was cleaned,
Yeah.
or cleansed of his leprosy. I guess he tried then to give presents to either Elisha or the king or somebody, and they were like, "No, we don't. Not into your presents. Just keep doing the right thing," basically.
Pretty much.
In the New Testament, lepers were cured frequently by Jesus. At one point, 10 lepers were cured. I think that was the book of Luke. It's also mentioned in the book of Matthew, Jesus healing a leper.
Well, and he touches them
Right,
to heal them,
he
which is a
touches them,
huge
which
deal.
was a huge deal. One of the lessons, I think only one of the 10 lepers came back to be gracious or thankful for it.
So that is all the time we've got for today. Hope you learned something. Again, some of these words were kind of downers, but we got to get through some of that stuff, Larry.
Absolutely. We're going to hit every single word that you guys send in, even if we have to do the alphabet twice.
That's alphabet.
Alphabet. Yeah, we're going to hit every single word that you guys send in, even if we have to hit the alphabet twice.
Absolutely. And just to give you a heads up, during the season of Lent, Larry and I are really excited to do the ABCs of Faith Lent edition, which is going to take us in a slightly different direction during that season. So we'll be excited to bring that to you in just a few weeks after Ash Wednesday. But until next time, we'll be on the letter M. I can't believe it, the halfway point.
Wow.
And I'm Dino.
And I'm Larry.
And we'll see you soon.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye.
Bye.